On behalf of myself, previous fellows, colleagues, and friends, I'd like to thank the AOFAS for awarding this prestigious pillar to Arthur Manoli II. I won't be there personally this afternoon to present the award to Arthur Jr. and Christina, Art's children, but I've asked Bruce Sangeorzan to do the honors for me, and I appreciate it again. Thank you, Bruce, and again, thank you to the American Orthopaedic Foot and Ankle Society for this tremendous honor. Take it away, Bruce.
I am utterly delighted to be standing in for Don Bohe for this. I've known Art Manoli for nearly 50 years. He's an iconic character, and he belongs at the pillar. So Art has been an educator regionally, nationally, and internationally for a lot of years. I've known him since I was a medical student. And when I became a resident, he was the youngest member of the faculty. He was a bit of a child prodigy, having graduated from medical school when he was 21 or 22. And by the time he finished residency and joined the faculty, he was younger than some of the chief residents. And it was only a couple years later that I came along. He was a legend already for his consummate knowledge of the literature and his ability to close down a bar one night and be ready to go in the OR the next morning. And he was, at the time I joined the residency, at the vanguard of the modern trauma era. This was in the early 80s when the AO principles, intramedullary nailing, were still not that widely disseminated. And he was at the vanguard of that treatment era. He related to residents and medical students in a distinctly non-hierarchical way. In those days, everything was very formal, and he was not formal. He spoke his mind and would be very willing to take you to task. But at the same time, while he was non-hierarchical, he still expected every resident to come to the OR fully prepared. He would pepper the residents with questions before starting a case. And before handing over the scalpel, you better know the anatomy, you better know where the incision goes, you better know what you're doing and why, and you better know where any nerves are in the way. He was completely authentic with no artifice, and that's a plus and a minus. He certainly wouldn't have gotten along in the controlled university world of political correctness because he said what he thought. And when I was a resident, he was delighted that I matched a Harborview for a trauma fellowship. But when I told him that I would pursue a foot and ankle fellowship after my trauma fellowship, because there wasn't enough information about treating foot injuries, he spent the remaining 9 months of my residency screaming down the hallway, "Hey, there goes that future podiatrist." I did get even with him because about 3 years later, he called and said, "Do you think Dr. Hansen would take me for a short-term fellow?" And from then on, we had a little bit of a détente on that question. So he's recognized for a lot of contributions to the orthopedic literature, and this is in spite of not living in an infrastructure of research. He was such a superb educator and had so much insight that he could do all of this without. Early on in the 80s, he pushed forward the idea of the anti-glide screw for osteoporotic bone of the fibula, and this is in a day when the whole idea of even fixing a fibula for an ankle fracture wasn't completely consolidated. A lot of people were still just putting a cast on ankle fractures in those days. He contributed the so-called Manoli hole for compression screws that are going along a slope. He highlighted for us the sequela of deep leg compartmental syndromes. He provided a lot of anatomy, knowledge, and intervention information for triple hemisection tendo Achilles anatomy and treatment. But where he made his big impact was on subtle cavus. The idea of cavus even being recognized was low. The treatments for cavus were few and far between. And when he learned, as he gave his talks, that people just didn't understand cavus, he created a pre-made cavus orthotic for forefoot-driven cavus. And he very much simplified the main concepts for treating peritalar subluxation, as we then called flat foot. He broke it down into simple, correct the valgus, correct the abduction, balance the soft tissues, and you're done. He spent a lot of years doing international education. This was him and Andy Sands and Hans Wipp and Stefan lecturing in Davos. And like Hansen, he loved trauma and loved foot mechanics, and he loved to treat. He loved to teach. He treated several members of my own family along with Jim Holmes. It's great to know you have people back home to help take care of those things. And I'm forever indebted from talking me out of going into general surgery and into orthopedics instead. CAVIS was one of his big topics. This is him demonstrating the Coleman block test. And when people would talk to him at the lectures and say, I really don't see CAVIS in my practice, and his response was, you may not see it, but it sure sees you, because it's everywhere, and you just have to, the eye doesn't see what the mind doesn't search for. He was most at home teaching in small groups. This is him receiving the original Hansen Teaching Award in Davos. And these are a picture of him surrounded by his fellows. And this is an iconic picture of Arthur Manoli Jr. teaching Arthur Manoli III how to do a Manoli hole in the forefoot. He was most at ease with teaching in spite of not being with the infrastructure. He learned after a short period of his being a chair that he didn't like it. He wanted to speak his mind and he wanted to teach, and that's what he was good at. And he distinctly belongs here as a pillar of the AOFAS, and Arthur Manoli III is here to accept on his behalf.
So I'd like to say a few words. I'd like to thank the Foot and Ankle Society for allowing me to come and accept this award on his behalf. And I know for a fact, this award would have been his proudest professional achievement. My father's favorite lecture that he always gave was on the art of scientific discovery and serendipity. And in that talk, he liked to talk about 3 fundamental lessons that are really kind of fundamental to his legacy, and which Bruce did a great job of highlighting. I think lesson number 1 is, one of the things he taught me was always observe the world around you. When you see something that doesn't make sense, you have to ask more questions. You should always write down what you see and try to make a connection. You can never change anything if you can't see it. And lesson number 2 was never stop thinking. You never know when an idea may come to you that might change the world. Always think about what you are doing and if there is a way that you can do it better. And lesson number 3 was always ask why. Always look for the underlying cause. I think my father was a master observer, and one of the greatest gifts of his greatest gifts was really his ability to see the underlying cause of things. He also understood how to simplify the connections so that others could easily see what he sees, and I think that had ability allowed him to forever change the way we think about certain things. And I think beyond those lessons and the many papers that he wrote, I've also realized more over time his real lasting legacy is really one of mentorship and relationships, and a large part of that was through AOFAS. And it's funny because I remember back when I was a child, I used to go, our family vacation was really the AOFAS conferences every year. And he did have a unique ability to go out to about 3 or 4 in the morning, and he'd come back to the room, sleep about 2 hours, wake up at 6 a.m., and give a podium presentation. And he did that for the entire conference. And I really only had one job as a child, and that was to make sure the ice bucket was filled for the 2 hours that he was back in the room. And sometimes I did, and sometimes I didn't, and I certainly heard about that. But, I always wondered why he couldn't be at the pool with us, when we were on these conferences and spend more time with us. But the reality is he was building relationships with other people in AOFAS. He was always a resource, certainly when his fellows had questions, and certainly when I was on call and was worried about compartment syndrome. He always had a black and white answer to everything. There was not a lot of room for nuance with my father, and for those who know them, they can appreciate that. He was really a bigger-than-life presence and personality and would fill the room. He could do it all. He could write, he could teach, but he was really a friend and mentor to countless young surgeons. And his legacy to me is one of hard work and dedication, attention to detail, and being inquisitive. But more importantly, I think we can all learn from his ability to be helpful to other people and to mentor other surgeons, in particular young surgeons. He taught me to always focus on my family and my professional relationships. Life is fragile and your career is fragile, more fragile than you think, and things can change in an instant. And if there's any one thing I've learned, it's at the end of the day, it's really the people that matter. So I want to say thank you again to AOFAS and to everybody who's nominated him over many years. Thank you.